Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Which One Works. I'm your host, John Peterson, and in this episode, I think it's episode 11 now, I am going to look at a couple of sets of images and talk about which one works for me. Now, anytime I'm composing a shot, I will think about both myself and how my eye will travel through the composition once I get back home. As well as I will give some time to how somebody else will look at the composition. Where will their eyes go? They're not in this location with me. They don't have all the other sensory input that I have in informing my feelings about the shot. And so I'll try to take a step back and look at them just artistically and critically and decide how I want to frame up the composition. Now, for some locations and some subjects, I will shoot it multiple different ways. There could be 3 or 4 different compositions that might work at a particular location for a shot, and then I'll wait until I get back home to decide which one works best for me. And sometimes, which one works best depends on my mood. I'll look at a set of images one day and have a favorite, and then, a couple of weeks later, I'll look again and I'll have maybe a different favorite. So it all depends, but at least I wanted to walk you through and talk you through my thought processes of how I evaluate images in my library. So let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, here's the first couple of images that I want to show you and talk you through, and these were shot just recently in the Palouse. I was up there leading a photo workshop, and we were at this particular location right around sunrise. And this area has some beautiful hills, and they have a barn and then this outbuilding that you see in the photograph. And we were starting to get some color in the sky. So this first shot really is about kind of having the outbuilding, this tree, the shape of the hills, and then the color that's happening in the sky. And folks, remember, these images are just very lightly processed. I haven't done my final processing on these images, and I won't for quite a while, waiting for my emotional attachment to sort of subside a little bit before I really do my critical photo processing. But this is one composition that I took in this area that I really kind of liked. It wasn't a trash photograph, and I think it kind of works. The things that grab my eye in here, of course, is the color at the top of the screen, which is great. The shape of the hill, which is a large reason of why I shot this. I kind of like the tree poking up above the hillside. And then I have this outbuilding down here. The thing that catches my eye about this outbuilding, though, is that it's kind of close to the left-hand side of the frame. And what I was trying to do a little bit in the field is have this distance be the same or close to this distance between the tree and the right-hand side of the frame. I didn't do a great job of that, but still, it is a worthy image, I think. The other thing that I don't particularly like is these 3 trees that are right here just peeking up above the hillside. You don't know that they're trees. They could be bushes. It just doesn't work because there's not enough information there to figure out what's going on with this. So this is kind of the first shot that I like. That, I may process up, I may keep, these 3 trees would go away. This proximity, though, down here, because the barn or this outbuilding is an important part of the scene, and having it so close to the lower left corner is, not my preferred way of composing photographs. So here's the next photograph. Same scene, a little bit later in the morning. I don't have this beautiful color in the sky, but I have some nice clouds up there. At this point, the sun had risen up behind the hills, and I have this beautiful light that's happening on the hillside, and this warm light starting to hit the barn, which is great. But notice now that the barn is much bigger as a compositional element in the scene. Compared to this, very small. And this shot is more about the sky that happens to be over farmland. This shot is more about farmland that happens to have a nice sky overhead. So it changes the emphasis of the subject and supporting cast relationships. Notice that these three trees up here now, they're a little bit larger. There's a little bit more information about what these things are, and they look like trees. So now these things are a little bit more resolving in the image. The other thing I really like about this is that the barn is not tucked away in the lower left corner. It's really much along one of the third lines right here. So very classic positioning for this. But what I also really like about this is notice the triangle that happens between the barn, the big tree on the right, the little trees on the left, and back to the barn. It's a great symmetrical shape or geometric shape in this photograph, and subconsciously that's very pleasing to us. So the feeling I get from this image is less tension, it just feels comfier and cozier than this image that feels more far away. All of the compositional elements are further away, they're smaller. Yeah, it's a great sky, and maybe in processing I'll work to punch up that sky so it's more of a dominant element. But the subjects here, the tree and the barn, just don't have enough visual impact in this image compared to this shot. It's very evident and very prominent in the shot. So overall, this is the one that works for me better than the previous one I showed. What do you guys think? All right, let's take a look at another series of images. This time we're at the Oregon coast, and I found this really huge starfish nestled between a couple of rocks at low tide. And I wanted to capture a picture of this starfish, if I could, in a way that really was pleasing and worked for me. And this was an interesting one in that the subject and the supporting elements around it didn't immediately indicate what kind of composition I needed to please myself. This one made me work a little bit to think about which one might work for me. And through that work, I shot this starfish in a couple of different ways. And then it wasn't until I got home that I would choose which one works for me. So let's take a look at this first shot. And I was standing a little bit further away in this first shot than the next shots that I have. And you can see that in my angle of inclination towards the rocks. And this is fine. The rocks are kind of going vertically up the frame, which is nice. This is in a portrait orientation. So my rocks are going vertical as well. The starfish, he's kind of pointing off to the right. If I look at the center of the starfish and figure out which way it's pointing, it's kind of pointing off to the right, which matches where this one leg is pointing. This is a nice documentary shot, but it doesn't do much for me artistically. It's just kind of a cool starfish and a couple of rocks, and that's about it. So this next way I framed it up, now I'm in sort of a landscape mode, a horizontal mode, to see if the rocks running horizontally across the image would work any better. And for this, I stood up on the rocks and I was pointing almost straight down at the starfish. And, my reaction to this a month later after I shot this is, yeah, it's okay. It's a documentary shot. It looks a little bit better, I think, if I heavily vignette this shot and really, really drive the viewer's focus onto the starfish. It's going to help. Sand itself is negative space, and so I've got a fair amount of sand there. This little rock up here is a little bit bothersome visually. I've got this other element in the upper left that doesn't really help with the storytelling of this shot. So this is a maybe for me. you know, it doesn't really make me super happy, but it's a maybe. Same kind of positioning for me in relation to the starfish, but in this time I oriented my camera in a vertical or portrait mode and shot down onto the starfish, again thinking that the verticality or the length of these rocks would be benefited by the vertical orientation of the camera. You know, and I think it works a little bit better having these run vertically across the majority of the frame, which is great. The starfish, I don't like what I did in the sense that it's a little bit close to the bottom. And I've got all of this negative space up here that really does not add to the story. In a shot like this, if I really wanted to get funky with it, you know, I would probably do a square crop and have these rocks run vertically and enlargen the starfish or the subject in the scene by doing that crop. But I typically don't want to crop that much of an image out. I should have done better in the field to recognize and compose a little bit closer to the starfish. So let's look at the last one. This is a little bit more interesting. Notice that the longer, larger rock that I had running vertically up the scene, I just included a small portion of it. I mean, the viewer knows, because this pattern is the same as this rock up here, the tonality and the pattern is the same, the viewer knows that this is a rock. I did not need to include a ton of that in there. I included the majority of this rock, which really I think works well. The starfish is oriented kind of at a 45-degree line going from upper left to lower right. This little part over here still bothers me, but I think because of where it's positioned and how I frame this up, I could use content-aware fill to make it go away, along with the little bits of seaweed that are up here and a really nice vignette around the whole starfish. I think this is the image that really works for me. All right, folks, there you go. There's another edition of Which One Works. I'd be really curious to hear what you think and if your opinion of which one works differs from mine. You know, the thing that's really cool about art and photography is that everybody's got their own opinion, and all of them are right. So what works for me may or may not work for you. But I've been doing this a long time, and I wanted to just share some of my insights and some of my thought processes of how I go through my catalog. So thanks for watching, and hey, if you're not subscribed, please do so, because every subscriber really means a lot to me. And tickle the bell, like, do all that kind of great stuff. And above all else, stay tuned for more videos and have a wonderful day.